It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports media business industrial complex, even in its winter slumber. How you doing today, Steve?
Very, very good. Thank you. Our third cast member is sitting here right at my feet, and so there's no telling what sort of thing he may bark at. And so he will, perk up when we say something relevant and he has an opinion to share, I assume.
Hopefully no squirrels out today.
It's a little early for the squirrel. The one particular squirrel lives in our front yard, so she's not. I think we'll avoid that particular squirrel. But how are you doing? How's everything?
Everything's fine, normal.
You have any big shows coming up on the horizon? I do not.
No, not really. I have one, I think, in April, but
who's touring around? I can't make up my mind on. There's two of them.
Oh,
one is Rush, and then two is Triumph. And Rush, because Neil Peart isn't there, and they've hired somebody. I don't know who she is, some female drummer. And I don't know how I feel about them. And there's a keyboard player now, so it's not a trio. I'm a huge Rush fan, and I don't know how I feel about that. So that's one. And then Triumph, they've got basically an all-star. They've got the guy who took names escaping me. The guy who took Richie Sambora's place in Bon Jovi is the new Triumph lead guitarist, and then they've got a drummer. Like Anna Bay, there's like 6 people up there now instead of 3. So
anybody from the original lineup of Triumph?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, the singer who also plays guitar, and then the bassist is there. But
that's a pretty good score.
They have a band around them basically doing all the work. But Triumph is a band that it's great. I love Triumph, the albums, but live, that's hard for a 3-piece because there's a bunch of layered guitars and all kinds of stuff and like keyboard stuff that they can't do live. So this might be better, but Rush, I just don't know how I feel about a 4-piece non-Neil Peart Rush. That one's tough.
Well, if you decide you want to go, you should let me know, because guess who is currently Rush's publicist?
Oh, and by that, Chris is talking about his beautiful spouse who works for a publicity company in the music
industry. Management company, technically.
Sorry, management company. Yes.
Publicity is her role, but she works for a management company. Yes, they are doing this Rush rollout.
If you're publicly offering me free tickets, I will most certainly take them.
I'm here to say that they are lovely human beings, so that's always good.
Have you met them?
No, I haven't met them. All of my wife's older brothers are very excited, and there's 4 of them.
It's like Neil Peart, for those of you who don't understand this, is an icon, and I just have a hard time with it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't begrudge, and this is beyond Rush, but we'll use Rush as the case study here. I don't begrudge bands doing this. I mean, and even if you say for the money or whatever, okay, sure, this is what their job is. What do you expect them to do? So, and this isn't a situation where they have some like legendary falling out. He passed. So I understand that they want to move on, and I also understand how essential he was, and that the 3-piece-ness of it all. But at the same time, I think if you understand expectations, it's also like it's okay for these musicians to make money off their legacy and celebrate their legacy.
I don't begrudge them at all. I mean, I know why they're doing it. And it's a business, and maybe they need the money, maybe they don't. Maybe they just want to play music again.
Right?
Who knows?
Exactly.
I don't have to go. That's the wonderful thing about the economy is I don't like it. I can just say, you know what, it's not for me, and move on. I don't like people who get mad at these bands for doing this, and he had to retire. No, you ought to just not go to the show. Was David Lee Roth absolutely terrible on the tour last year? Yes. Did he embarrass himself? Yes. Did somebody force you to pay money to go to the show? No, they didn't. It's called the free market, people. So I don't begrudge him at all. I haven't made up my mind, but I will definitely let you know if for sure. Now that I
Yeah.
realize your wife is the publicist,
Yeah.
sort of.
Yeah. It's been an interesting, it's funny. She's
Is she
had,
doing Triumph too?
no, she's not doing Triumph.
They're still Metallica, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
I'm
still,
not
it's
a huge
still,
Metallica fan. I mean, I like him, but it's not really it's not in my top 10 or anything. But Rush is up there. Rush is like, top 2 or 3. Nothing will beat the Mighty Van Halen, but Rush is close.
it's going to be a big tour, I think, actually. I think it's going to go well for them.
Well, you know what's funny is that Neil Peart's Geddy Lee's voice was so high in the younger days that it actually sounds better when it came down, a little bit in register. And so and I haven't seen him in a decade, or more. I don't know what they've been out, 6 years or so, and I didn't see the last tour. But his voice, when it's not quite as high and screechy, actually I think fits the music a little bit better.
See, Steve's talking himself into it.
No, no, not necessarily. I mean, I don't even begrudge the woman she's just taking a gig. It's just, but no Neil Peart is a hard thing to swallow. That's all.
I believe it has been endorsed by his widow.
Yeah, I know. But
Yeah.
again, and I'm more power to him. Hope it works. Nobody's forcing me to buy a ticket.
No.
Now, if somebody whose husband I may know offers me a free ticket, that may be another matter, but we'll
Where
see.
where are they playing in Houston?
I don't know. Here, we'll find out. We
Probably
got
the
to move on to
basketball.
real stories, but
Yeah.
I know
Probably the
you
basketball
people,
arena, though, I would imagine.
your people out there probably don't care about 10 minutes of Rush talk, but I do. So Rush band.
All
Let's
right,
see.
let's move on, Tom Sawyer, then.
We are, and
Um,
I'm gonna announce keep going, but now I'm focused on Rush, so we're gonna look up their tour schedule. But keep going.
I'm not even a giant Rush fan, but I think I would probably prefer to keep talking about Rush than jumping into this endless nonsense of college football, where we had this Washington Demond Williams Jr.'s. I'm leaving, I'm staying, I'm signing contracts, I'm breaking contracts, I'm about to be sued for breaking contracts. Oh, imagine that. We've discovered a way to keep this moving forward at Washington. And now, it really seems to me, Steve, that this is one of those moments where it walked up to the precipice of total chaos and slightly tiptoed away from the edge.
Um, Maybe. So what he's talking about here is it demon?
Demon.
Demon is in the demon
Like demon
child.
with a soft D.
Demon. Okay, Demon Williams Jr. Shockingly enough, signed an NIL deal. Now his is a little bit different, and what he did comes out of this house lawsuit settlement. Um, and so
House the person, not the representative body.
sorry, yeah. He has a profit sharing agreement, okay, and this is what was legalized, and meaning that he gets a share of the profits generated by the athletic department. It's not professional football. Remember, this is he's a poor amateur athlete. This certainly isn't professional sports at all. Um, okay, so he has a percentage of the profits. And so then all of a sudden he out of the blue and is based on the story. Oh, sorry. The story, by the way, is Sportico. Washington's quarterback flip-flops previews. Washington quarterbacks flip-flop previews new college sports legal issue by Michael McCann, who we've done many times, January 8th, 2026. Okay, so after he signed this deal, and it sounds like without the knowledge and consent of his agent, he then decided he was going to enter the transfer portal, meaning leave Washington. Now, normally these schools just say, okay, bye, and then they go buy themselves a replacement. Well, in this case, the legal issue here is that because he's a revenue sharing agreement, there's an issue about whether he's in breach of contract here, because of the revenue sharing. And furthermore, even though the contract says he's not an employee, the issue that the Sportico column talks about is whether or not it says this is an employment contract. The fact of the matter is the company is he has an obligation to play football under the contract. And on the basis of him playing football, the company is paying him a share of the profits of the football team, which would mean it's sort of effectively an employment contract, which is what the NCAA is trying to avoid here. Now, the end of this, by the way, is, and his agent dumped him, and so then the new agent, he has a new agent, and then Williams himself backed out of it and said he's not in the transfer portal at all. So that's the story. But the real story here is, one, I'm horrified by profit sharing arrangements with college students. And two, did these people just back themselves into an employment contract that nobody wanted? Those are the issues. That's why this is important. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think if he had stayed in the portal and end up leaving University of Washington, I think the series of lawsuits that would have kicked off, sparked, would have been a real Jacob's ladder situation here. That's why I was sort of saying, like, it's tiptoeing to the edge. I think he finally took some good advice, because I think his
Sounds
case
like
would have
he's
been
an
weak.
idiot.
Yeah, I mean, I
to
think
be
that would
honest.
have been a tough sell on his part by his lawyers and representatives. But yeah, I agree. If this here, sometimes it's good to bring these down to more local levels. Most of you, many of you, some of you out there, and I know myself and Steve, had been in the process of hiring and then classifying different hires within a structure, legal, tax, all this frameworks about compliance towards whatever the laws are, variety of laws. And so you can have a full-time employee, you can have a part-time employee, can
Have a
have a
consultant.
contract, you can have a
Yeah.
consultant, you can have a freelancer. All these have very specific designations. No one would argue that these aren't lowercase e employment arrangements, but they have very specific differences and implications. And that this is what so if any of you have been involved in that process, you have a very kind of visceral understanding of what and how these work. These are just at massive scale. And everyone is kind of pushing the bleeding edge here about what's going to count. And they don't even have that level of clarity that you might have when you decide to hire a consultant versus a part-time contractor versus a full-time employee.
Well, yeah, I mean, and none of this is well thought out. And what you're
No.
talking about is decades and decades and
Yes.
decades of established process
Precedent
and law.
process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like an employee with a capital E is typically an at-will employee that gets a W-2. You could have an employee, the capital E, that has an employment contract that gets a W-2. Then you could have a contractor that is a lowercase employee that gets a 1099. You could have a consultant that's sort of the same as a contractor that's going to get a 1099. I mean, there's all these categories. And in this case, basically, Williams seems to have an employment contract, lowercase e, in which he agrees to perform services for the university in exchange for a percentage of the cut of the profits. Now, this is, again, the NCAA does all this to themselves. There's so many other better ways to do this. And so we've said this before, but in case for those of you out there don't understand this, a huge reason why universities do not want um, athletes categorized as employees is if they're employees, they have to pay employment taxes. There's going to be certain benefits depending on the state, even as a part-time employee, depending on where they are, and they don't want any of that. And so this is why they're fighting tooth and nail to not be employees. And so athletes want it because then they can form a union and then negotiate at the NCAA, and, or at least a conference in mass or even a university. And so this is a massive problem. And this Williams kid is sort of the tip of the iceberg. Now, he seems really dumb to me. You sign this contract, you're one of the rare few college football athletes that gets a share of, company profits, and then you're just going to turn around and enter the transfer portal. This kid sounds like someone who is young and dumb and doesn't know what he's doing and isn't helping himself. That's what it
And
sounds
doesn't
like
have
to
the
me.
right people advising him, or well, that we don't
Well,
know
he
because
does. He's not
he went
listening to
behind
him.
behind the agent's back, right? So yeah, I mean, how can you argue anything? And listen, what is he 20? So like it's sort of like it follows pattern and logic.
Yeah, but guess
That
what?
we
If you're going to have signed multi-million-dollar contracts at 20, you ought to be wise
yes,
enough to figure out how to properly do it.
yeah, just calm down, man. Just collect the check for another 12 months. You're not even that. I'm sure the commitment. Yeah, it's crazy town. I don't know. We've spoken blue in the face about this. I don't know that there doesn't seem to be any will to actually fix this. And by the way, we also read a bunch of stories that are just telling us how insanely popular and some of the best TV ratings ever the college football playoffs have been, and that the college football in general has been. So it's not hurting. None of this seems to be hurting the business of the sport. Now, you could argue that, and which I would, that we're talking about bubble and there will be a burst, but that bubble be growing.
Will it ever burst, though? I mean, what it's doing is it's changing the nature of college sports forever because they're not going to back out of this. There's not an end to this. They're not going to just 15 years from now all of a sudden cut off the ability of athletes to earn income from their name, image, and likeness. If anything, it's going to get broader. Even if
No,
it doesn't get broader, it's totally different than 15 years ago when it was truly amateur athletics. This is a professional sport. It's professional business. Period. Dot. The end. It has changed forever.
and I actually think this is somewhat of a high tide lifts all boats in terms of, I also think, that the circle of profit generating sports within the context of the universities and academia. Yes, obviously football and men's, and I'd say actually women's basketball. You'd put those are the top three, right? Revenue drivers. But because there's so much money and so much now avenues to make money, you can go 7 or 8 deep in a lot of these sports this is going nowhere. This is only accelerating. And so when are there going to be new rule structures in which to manage it, or is, how long is the chaos going to continue? But, it doesn't really matter what you think about the collective bargaining, whether that's good or bad. These things are going to continue to be forced issues. I mean,
Well,
and Washington, that would have been a massive test case.
yeah. Well, you just kind of said the magic word inadvertently, which is collective bargaining. So that's really the next big question in this. Right now, there's no collective bargaining. They're not employees. But again, what we just said is you can make a case that this Williams kid has an employment contract. If he has an employment contract, you could make a case that there should be allowed a union. And this is, by the way, this what was the bill in Congress? I forget what we called it.
The SCORE Act.
Yeah, thank you. SCORE Act. I mean, the SCORE Act was going to, by federal law, prohibit student athletes from being unionized, which was the big thing that came out of that SCORE Act on behalf of universities. And without that, I mean, this could end up in the courts. It's going to end up in the courts someday. And I also think there's a big difference between, Demond Williams getting a cut of university profits and then have the setter at the Southeast Kansas State, Hornets volleyball team, doing an advertisement for the local barbecue joint. Hi, I'm Tammy Williams.
Yeah, but Steve, women's volleyball,
I'm just making up.
They broke on broadcast television. They scored almost a 2 Nielsen rating.
I'm not. I'm just saying there's a difference.
I'm just saying that you've got, but it doesn't matter if you're looking at not putting the genie back in the bottle. What this has allowed is it's even a larger market for these sports to become revenue generators. And considering the size and breadth of United States college structure and college sports structure, you've incentivized an entire industry that, of course, football and basketball are your leaders, but you're going 10 deep now in expanding that market.
Oh, I
Because,
know. What
yeah,
all I'm saying, all my point is like on a kind of non-legal ethical level, I don't have a problem with if you're going to do a legitimate advertisement and use your name. I'm the guard for the local basketball team and I'm going to advertise for the local restaurant. To me, there's a difference between that and having a profit sharing agreement, with a major university. I don't like that. I don't support that at all. That's my
I
point.
think they've missed the timing window
Yeah,
of where
well,
you could
yeah.
have maybe quarantined basketball and
We've been
football.
we've been
Yeah,
saying this for two
and I think that
years. It's over.
it's over because they've opened up the market too big. Right now, you've got a plethora of moneyed interests. So that will, that I was like, what about us too? What University of Washington? Tell me if you think this my armchair legal analysis is correct. But University of Washington really interestingly forced two issues that almost demand that there be a judgment day on collective bargaining. One, even structuring a contract with the revenue share was a new, Rubicon line in terms of college deals with student athletes. One. And then two, their willingness to sue for breach of said contract almost demands a discussion of what those implications are for collective bargaining. So University of Washington either stupidly bumbled into that or probably was willing to force that conversation through both of these moves, the original contract and the willingness to sue for breach.
I don't think they stupidly backed into it at all. I
No,
mean, they
that's what
know
I'm
what
saying.
they're
They
doing.
probably forced to, yeah. But they're aware that and it's almost like, remember in Major League Baseball where you still don't, like you'd have one owner would just do a crazy thing and everyone have to, what is this guy doing? It's almost like, and because there's no control, you can have a University of Washington go and, force an issue probably more faster than the majority of, colleges would like.
I mean, part of the problem here is that the courts have interjected this. Like nobody really agreed to this profit sharing arrangement. This is a result of, you know, complicated uh legal issues born from court judgments. Okay. Um, that having been said, as we said, so I think the genie's out of the bottle with this, or whatever analogy you want to say. And yes, this is the leading edge for sure. But my guess here is that Washington, University of Washington, is not the only university that has given a profit sharing agreement to an athlete. I'm
Oh,
sure
just
it's
maybe we're
not.
hearing about it.
Well, yeah, because this is the guy who was stupid enough to terminate it, and all of that. Nobody ever said football players are smart people. So it's out there. I forget what you were even asking me now. What was your question?
Well, I mean, just, like you sort of answered it. You think that University of Washington made a very conscious decision
Oh,
that
yeah, that was your
understood.
question. Yeah,
Yeah. And then
it
two,
was.
I mean, does that become the battleground for eventually a final judgment on does there need to be some version of collective bargaining to manage this?
Well, I mean, if Congress steps in and gets a SCORE Act passed, that's going to answer the question. Okay, I mean, because and trust Congress because they're trustworthy. They always do what they say, and they have the best interests of the people in mind at all times, as we all know. On both parties. But in all seriousness, Congress said they would get back to it in this coming term in 2026. Nobody can trust Congress in all seriousness. But if they do, that answers the question. And then they could be a lawsuit after that. But then at that point, then you'd have to get a court to throw out a federal law, and that's a whole nother level of problem. And so I think I'm gonna defer on whether or not this is kind of the Rubicon of something else until we see what Congress does with that SCORE Act, because they didn't vote it down. Remember, all they did is say
It
we didn't.
tabled it basically,
They didn't get to it because there were some,
and it wasn't going to get out
talking
of
around
committee.
rules. Yeah, they were jockeying around on both sides and on it and everything. And the House is so divided right now that like the Republican Party's down to like a 2-seat majority right now because somebody died and somebody's sick and all blah blah blah.
It actually
So
had an
nothing's going to get done.
interesting where like they didn't actually have enough of a majority because you had, kind of multiple factions kind of disagreeing. It was one of
Well,
those
yeah,
where
Thomas Massey's going to vote against Trump on everything, and yeah, so the effectively it's almost tied. Which and what that means in a practical level is that nothing but the most non-controversial stuff's going to ever get through Congress until the next election. That's what it
yeah,
means.
probably. Plus it's not, it's not an easy one either. Um,
No, I mean it's not a real obvious R versus D thing, here. Because the typical R position would be no union, right? The typical D position would be unions. But in this case, some of these boosters at these major universities are, putting money on both sides of this thing. These congressmen have sons and daughters who are athletes, and it's not a real easy
Also,
conservative
it's
versus Democrat
pork.
thing.
If you are a representative for a state that's got a giant sports program at your state university, that's you're voting on pork just like that is a new oil pipeline or a new military base or whatever. That those are good old fashioned pork decisions.
And your state is giving millions of dollars to public and probably private universities as well.
Right. So
Because the
it's
private
very complex.
universities have grants, by the way, if people don't know this.
Yeah. So, uh, well, we'll see what happens with all this. I think
It's a sign of things to come, is what it is.
yeah,
Now, are you going to have somebody as stupid, as dumb as this Damon Williams guy? Maybe not, but the issues that are presented here are going to come back. The issue presented that you guys need to take away from this is: was that an employment contract? If so, what does that mean? And that is unresolved.
and what kind? Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like backing up, showing up for your first day of work, backing up the truck, taking 2 years worth of salary, putting it in the truck, then getting into the driver's seat saying, I quit and trying to drive off.
Kind of, yeah. Or it's sort of like, you know what it is? If you want to put it in football terms, this is sort of Brandon Ayuk a little bit, who has a contract with the 49ers worth, I don't know the number, tens of millions of dollars,
Probably
maybe.
in the 60s and 70s, I think.
Right, right. And because he apparently doesn't want to be in San Francisco anymore, he's sort of trying to force them to cut him, and he's asking the union to not advocate for him. And he's doing what you said. He's got tens of whatever the number is in the truck, and then he's parking the truck on the side of the road and walking down to the gas station to call his brother to pick him up.
Yeah. Hi, yeah, yeah. All right, so let's move on. We'll stay in the world of we'll stay in the courts, so to speak. And
My favorite
we have
place.
we have a lot of movement on the Brian Flores kerfuffle, which you might remember was Steve will update us here, but it was a discrimination case, but then the real interesting part is then how does this get adjudicated, and whose authority and how is actually what is now apparently going to the Supreme Court. And what happens faster? This get heard by the Supreme Court or Brian Flores get named a head coach?
Okay,
In the
well,
league?
I think slow your roll though. It has not. They've filed a writ of certiorari with the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has not taken a case, and
Right.
they don't take.
They haven't decided they're looking
Right.
at it yet.
So to back up here, Brian Flores, defensive coordinator for the Vikings at the time, filed a lawsuit against the league. We talked about this like 2 years ago or more, probably three, because this happened in 2022. He's alleging racial discrimination associated with the hiring practices of coaches. And his point here is that because of he got interviews, so alleged, that the teams did only because of the Rooney Rule, and they never had any real intent of hiring him. And so he's therefore alleging racial discrimination against the league and 3 or 4 teams. The Texans are one of them. The Vikings, I think, are one.
Remember, this involved the fake, or not fake, but the mistaken text message from Bill Belichick.
Oh, I forgot about that part.
Congratulating the wrong Brian, and so it got very kind of even gossipy at the moment that it happened.
Right. So it's the NFL, the Broncos, Giants, and Texans. Okay. So now I have done legal work for the NFL, or at least for NFL teams and with the NFL and with a Super Bowl host committee. And I can tell you that every single thing the NFL does has an arbitration clause in it. The collective bargaining agreement does with the players, all these, the Constitution of the NFL, all this stuff. It's a very pro NFL arbitration clause. Did I say collective bar? I meant arbitration.
Yeah.
And basically Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, either gets to be the arbitrator or appoint the arbitrator. Okay. So the difference here is that Flores is saying that Roger Goodell individually in the NFL is doing the discriminating. And so he made the case to federal court that this should not be arbitrated because the allegations he's making are specifically these people involved. And the Second Circuit Court of Appeals actually agreed with him and threw out the arbitration clause and said that Flores' case could proceed to trial. And so now the NFL and it doesn't say that they heard it en banc, but all this, and I didn't pull the appellate case, but it says the Court of Appeal Second Circuit said it would not reconsider its August opinion, so they might have refused an en banc hearing of it. Sounds like maybe, but so the NFL has now filed a writ of certiorari with the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court takes like 5% of cases that get filed to it. Like, they get like 7,000. Writ of certiorari is basically an appeal. It's the Supreme Court. And they get like 7,000 a year and they take like 150. So whatever that number comes, that's less than 5%. So they don't have to take it. And they typically take, serious issues, constitutional issues where there's a difference of opinion between circuit courts. Arbitration is something that typically the courts have stayed out of. Usually courts let arbitration clauses stick, and there's not a lot of ways to get out of arbitration. This one is a bit unusual in that regard, so it's possible, I think, the court might take it, maybe, just because it's so unusual. Now, and so this is Front Office Sports. NFL asks Supreme Court to take up arbitration case against Flores by Margaret Fleming, dated January 8th. And they mentioned John Gruden's case in here also. Gruden was the guy who was sending like racist and sexist emails and stuff, and that got leaked. He sued the NFL. Same thing, arbitration clause. And then the Nevada state court threw out the arbitration clause and said the case could proceed to trial. So those two things are ongoing. So it's this case is interesting because it's very unusual for an arbitration clause to get thrown out. So your thoughts?
To me, and I think this is why the NFL is, being aggressive here. And I agree these cases are linked numerous ways. But I think to me, I read this as the NFL playing hardball and pushing this to to whatever extent they can, as basically because they want to protect their self-governance, by tooth and nail here, because, so that, and that's why they're willing to go to the mat on both these cases. And, on both these cases, the Gruden and Flores ones, the NFL has taken some losses here. And so I think it's interesting. This really, to me, isn't even about the merits of the case, so to speak, at this point. This is about process, and the NFL is just going to do everything in its power to maintain as much self-governance as it can.
Yeah, it's not about the merits of the case. I don't think Flores is wrong about the Rooney Rule, by the way, if you want to get to it. I mean, the Rooney Rule says that when teams are hiring head coaches, and I think it flows down to coordinators at least, they have to interview at least one person of minority status, and that's defined somehow. And there's been like legions of examples of how teams have already picked somebody in their mind, and there's a way out of it. I think if they promote somebody within, I don't know, it's not 100% firm.
Sometimes they just outright flaunt it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And sometimes they just say, we need they bring somebody in for a Rooney Rule interview, and then it's clearly not real, and they do it, and they've already decided, and that's what Flores is alleging here, and he's totally right about that. Of course, on the other hand, nobody forced Flores to go to the interview either. He's voluntarily doing the interview, even though he knows the situation. But this is what happens when you have things like mandatory, requirements based on race. This is what happens. And so this is why I don't like this kind of thing. It's a merit-based thing. I think in today's world, the NFL is, don't quote me on the number, but what, 70% African American or something like that, and along those lines or more. Nobody's discriminating against anybody in today's world in the NFL. And so I think the Rooney Rule ought to the NFL would be smart to just dump it entirely, I think, and that would solve that problem. But the arbitration stuff, it's what you said. It's they would try. What they should do is just pay Flores some money, settle it, confidentiality agreement, the end. But they don't want to do that because they do want to have a court protect its arbitration provisions.
Yes, I think if this, let's take that arbitration piece out for a second, and I'll reinsert it. If this was a fight about the Rooney Rule specifically, I don't think the NFL puts up this fight. They'd be like, oh, because I think the court struck out our ability to, so they do away with the Rooney Rule. I think they wouldn't care to some degree, right? Be like, oh, great, now the court says we can't do it, and we can move on from that, and live in.
And again, who's discriminating in the NFL against minorities in coaching in today's world?
But my point is, they wouldn't fight to keep that rule, right?
No.
So they're fighting to keep the arbitration. If for whatever reason this falls out, it could have consequences for the Rooney Rule, but that's not the NFL's seawall.
They can't let an appellate court opinion be the hanging chad.
Right.
Okay. Because if they do, then the same argument comes up, and then everybody's going to raise this and start getting around the arbitration clause. And the NFL is very protective of arbitration. My experience with the NFL is they act like the 8 million pound gorilla in the room. Do what you say, do what we say, period, out the end. I could tell you some stuff about what they tried to do. I can't say it here. But that's why and no courts no juries like 8 million pound gorillas. Okay. This is why like insurance companies settle, because they're going to lose, for example. And so the NFL, that's why they have arbitration, because nobody's going to take the NFL's side over, some player in a lawsuit or whatever, or some employee. That's why they have arbitration. So that is why they have to go all out with this, because they can't let a judgment that interferes with their ability to arbitrate everything stand. And that's what your point is, I think, right?
Yeah, totally. So that's why it's a super interesting case, which has actually,
and it's the same with the Gruden case.
You take all details out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right, the sort of twin case with Gruden over the same thing.
This Gruden case is totally slimy, by the way. In the Gruden cases, he's sending ridiculous emails, and then people are leaking them. The whole thing is gross, but the issue is bigger than that. The issue is the arbitration.
Right? Yeah. No, it's exactly. So, and the NFL has taken some losses.
They've taken a lot of losses recently. They lost the CTE lawsuit. There's been others. They've not. They used to have a string of wins where they would win everything, and they have lost some stuff.
Which is why they don't want things going to court.
Yes. Well, again, because no jury wants to take, the side of the massive, massive corporate conglomerate over an individual.
Generally, no.
Generally speaking.
But one place where the NFL has not taken many losses is in ratings. With 200, they just released the 200 top broadcasts of 2025 by ratings, and now their metric algorithm formula for ratings now by Nielsen does include the streamers. It has a very holistic view of what we call television and how to get to viewer numbers. So all of that you can't. This is taking all of that into consideration. And we have some of the data in front of us, but suffice it to say, I haven't done the math, but NFL is what, 2/3 of the list at the most conservative estimate?
Oh, we have it in here. So this is Sports Business Journal. College football makes presence felt among top 200 telecasts by Austin Karp, dated the 8th of January. Again, And so there is a chart in here, top 200, but let's just read some stuff here. So according to the column, sports accounted for 96 of the top 100 most watched telecasts in 2025 and 181 of the top 200 telecasts. That's down from 182 in 2024. The NFL had 84 slots in the top 100 and 52 from 100 to 200. So if the basic math here, that is 136 of top 200 are NFL teams. Now, yes, this includes streaming, includes YouTube, it includes Amazon Prime. The point of the column was that college football has made a move. And they're saying the top 25 games.
But the national championships game was still clocked in at 49.
Right. Now, yeah, I mean, and we're not going to read all these, but here's the top 10. Super Bowl, what is that? 59 Chiefs Eagles last year. Number one by a mile, 125 million viewers. AFC Championship game, NFC followed by AFC Championship game, 57 million. Chiefs Cowboys on Thanksgiving, 57 million. Packers Lions on Thanksgiving. AFC divisional playoffs, Ravens Bills. NFC Championship game, Washington Eagles. NFC divisional playoffs, Rams Eagles. NFC wildcard, Packers Eagles. President Trump's address to joint session of Congress in March 9th, and then more playoffs, Lions, Washington. That's the top 10. In other words, the only thing that's not NFL football in the top 10, it was the presidential. I guess that's probably State of the Union.
I think that first year, right? They don't call it that, but yes.
Yeah, and that's the only thing. And if you go down to the top 20, everything from 11 to 20 is football. And then go ahead.
You got to get to 28 to get Game 7 Dodgers Blue Jays.
At 26.88 million. And so the Super Bowl,
which is a massive win for Major League Baseball, by the way.
It is, but it's 96 million less than the Super Bowl. Yeah, it's almost 3.5 times bigger.
Well, everything else on television are, the dogs fighting for scraps from the dinner table.
Yes. And so what I wanted to point out here is, so you go the first, and so then the next thing that's not sports in here is Trump's presidential inauguration address on January 20th. And those are the only thing. And then there's college, the national championship game is 49th, as Chris said. So if you go then to the 50 through 100 here, the Academy Awards are number 72. And then
that's the first non-sports or politics entry.
And the NCAA National Basketball Championship between Florida and Houston's 88. Kentucky Derby 95. And then that's it for the top 100. And so then you go to the next 100 to 150, 101 to 150, NFL, NCAA tournament, NFL, Grammys. The Grammys are 122. And then something called The Floor, which is a post Super Bowl show, which we think was a game show. After Super Bowl broadcast, 138 on Fox. Saturday Night Live, 50th anniversary special, 140. And then that's it. All the rest of it is NFL or college football. And then the last 50, the National Dog Show, the Masters, 60 Minutes has got a bunch of broadcasts in the bottom. There's like 7 60 Minutes broadcasts, 8, the Golden Globes, Dancing with the Stars. What there isn't in here is a single network broadcast, scripted broadcast show, comedy or drama, not a single one. And in what was it, 184, 182 of the 181 of these are sports. That is unbelievable. And it shows you why the media rights contracts are so huge with the NFL. But I've been talked enough. Sorry, your thoughts.
The Floor is in fact a game show.
Perfect. There you go. So it knows zero scripted dramas or comedies.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, at all. I think, it's fun to see these things with data and lists, but like I was 0% shocked. I'm kind
I
of
mean, there are three or four drama, of the scripted network shows I watch. And not one of them's anywhere in the top 50.
Well, part of it is that there's just a lot more of them. They're not constricted to three channels. So some of that, I don't take that as a total condemnation. I think that just shows you the fractured market and hyper genre specification. And, so I think in some ways you can read that as a good thing because there are more shows to appeal to more people that get more of a divided audience. And they are not time bound anymore, right? They're not something you have to worry about being on your couch at 9:30 on a Thursday, or what have you. They're bulk dropped, the stream, you can watch them at your own. So I think there's lots of factors about why that is. I don't think that necessarily is a condemnation on that. I think it's just interesting, but what it shows you is that the dominance of live, right, with sports being the monster live. So, and we see that gold rush everywhere, like, on this, and the best exemplification of that is that how aggressive the streamers are getting as much live content as they can. The big dogs like the NFL and a bunch of downstream content. The freaking Academy Awards, which, is one of the, I think, as we said, the first non-sports or politics entry onto the list. You might not have seen this, but it's moving to YouTube in 30 or 2029.
Yeah, I did
So,
see that. Yeah.
so,
I don't know anybody watched the Academy Awards, to be perfectly honest.
oh, I watch it every year.
My general rule is if if a movie won an Academy Award, that means it sucks and I don't watch it.
That's ridiculous.
That's my general rule.
Yes, we realize. But that's massive. That's crazy town that it's moving to YouTube. So I think there's many reasons for that, but live is king. That's the headline.
Sounds like sports is king, though, also.
Yes. Well, it's the leader of live.
For context here, the high watermark for network broadcast came in 1983, and I'm sure, Chris, it don't take a genius for you to guess what it is.
MASH.
The MASH finale drew 105.97 million viewers, a rating of 60.3, and a 77% share, meaning 77% household share of households are watching that. And if you take, and so that's MASH, which was probably the biggest television drama of all time. But
Situation comedy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it kind of became a drama at the end, but yeah, it was, I guess, technically a comedy. Now I'm going to do this on the fly here. Let's go to Game of Thrones finale ratings. Okay, so the finale, let's see, the finale in season, what was it, 8, right?
Yeah.
7, 8, 8 drew 44.2 million, and that's HBO. No, sorry, that's wrong. The finale capped off, it says a final season that averaged 44.2 million per episode, including 13.6 million live on HBO. And so 44 million, if you take that over to the chart, and I brought Game of Thrones because it's probably the biggest show in recent years, I would say, right? Realistically.
Close. I think if you wanted to chart going forward,
that would put it at between 4 and 5 on this chart. 44
and
million.
Even that, like, that's such a different media universe even then. Like, it's almost it feel, it's not that long ago in terms of how we count the years. In terms of where these industry and technologies have gone, it really is almost antiquated. But I think if we were to time machine to today, a year from now, what I suspect you would see around the same kind of point you're making is you would probably see the Stranger Things finale in that top 200.
Yeah, I've never seen a word of it, but a single moment of it. But I know that's probably the biggest show out there right
So I
now.
think that would be like if we were kind of looking for our marker about next year and say, like, do you go from an N of 0 to an N of 1 in terms of a scripted show making that top 200, and to see that would be that. But even that's weird to count because they did this strange drop where they dropped a couple episodes on Thanksgiving break, basically. They dropped a couple episodes on Christmas break, and they dropped a couple of episodes on New Year's Day break. So it's like almost, again, like, how do you count it, right? That's different than, the AFC playoff game or the Grammys or a presidential address, right? So it gets a little sticky. But if you wanted to see, I bet you that however they decide they're going to count it, they'll count the Stranger Things, finale will crack that top 200, but still probably be the only scripted show.
And be nowhere near the top, by the way.
No. We're talking like, yeah, in that bottom, in 101 to 200.
Okay, so been doing some Google things here. Uh, so the CBS show Tracker, according to Google AI, is the top rated network drama, but it doesn't give numbers. So I'm trying to find numbers.
Oh, it
here.
won't even be. It would not even crack the top 10 if you count the streamers. There would be 10 shows above it.
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah.
In terms of like that might be like battling for, if you're making a list of 400, they'd be in the 240s or the 300s.
Okay, so the first column I found on this is from the Hollywood Reporter. Okay, Trackers season, and this is dated December 2025, December 5th, 2025 by Rick Porter. It says CBS's Tracker sits atop an early look at 35-day cross-platform ratings for the fall, as it did last season. Top of the ranking, let's see, Tracker's season premiere averaged 17.3 million viewers over 5 weeks, right in line with his average of 17.35 million last season. So Tracker is the top rated show, and that is, I don't know why that's not on the, if something's off here, because the bottom of the 200 is 8.99 million, which is Texas Tech BYU. So I don't know why Tracker isn't on here if they really are getting 17 million. So something's off.
It's all these formulas. But this is Stranger Things finale, New Year's Eve. Massive viewership with the season hitting over 105.7 million viewers and entering Netflix all-time top 10 top English show. And they had, for the season finale, they had during debut week, right? See, this is also like how it's so different.
How you count.
Yeah. But for debut week of the final episode, which was December 29th to January 4th, it garnered 31.5 million views. And then total season views were 105.
So then something about this chart on Sports Business Journal does not equate.
It's not counting because they're not counting the cumulative views, which are the nature of modern series watching.
So the Sports Business Journal chart is counting live in the moment views.
Yeah, probably. Or yes,
right.
Its formula is at least is heavily favoring them.
Right, because there's not too many people that are going to go backwards and watch the Georgia-Tennessee game. A handful, but whereas I would say probably far more people than not will watch, for example, Tracker on streaming
and is that CBS Tracker, right?
CBS, yeah.
So that's Paramount. So yes, and so that's a deep value. All these shows are also, these are library archive shows, right? Like, so, and these things don't, so they're, even look at that one season from basically Thanksgiving to New Year's, 105 million views for that final season of Netflix. And then, that's going to have a long tail. I mean, I think when they crunch HBO's numbers, Game of Thrones still, like, in terms of like, every year, most streamed thing is up in the top 5 minimum. So, it's just wildly different metrics, business models, and utility to these streamers. But
So
live is massive.
the Hollywood Reporter column I cited makes a point to say that these are 35-day ratings. So that's the difference. So in 35,
that's longer than Thanksgiving to New Year's, for instance.
Absolutely, yes, right. So this is not the same measurement as that's the difference. So that's the difference. It appears as though these Sports Business Journal ratings are live, and then what I cited from Hollywood Reporter is not live. So
yeah, and people catch up, right? So whether it's Breaking Bad, whether it's Yellowstone, like
and
a lot
there's
of people
others.
miss the first couple seasons, but then you go back and you pound, even if you eventually catch up, right? So they're just wildly different business models. We should almost, which it sounds like the Sports Business Journal list is kind of doing without being kind of explicit about it, but we just shouldn't be talking about these things as the same.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, so the end of this Hollywood Reporter gives a list: network 20 top 25 minus sports, 35-day cross-platform rating. So that includes all streamings. Okay. Tracker number one, something called High Potential, 16.4 million.
It's another
Matlock.
network procedural.
Yeah. Well, this is ABC, CBS, NBC on here. Matlock, Boston Blue, Sheriff Country, Ghost, Chicago Fire, Elsbeth, DMV, NCIS. All those are above 10 million.
There's still a lot of baby boomers, and they still watch network television. That's what that number tells you.
Yes, but that's not live. And so live, it would be like Trackers is the top 7.3 million, 17.3 million. Live, it's probably less than half that, would be my guess.
And even a lot of boomers know not to watch Tracker live, but go and hit start later, whether it's via the DVR or the Paramount app or whatever.
I watch Tracker, and I've never once watched it live.
Right, exactly.
I record it so expressly so I don't have to watch the commercials.
All right, so we've dissected all the media, Steve.
We delved kind of away from sports, but that's okay.
No, but those are interesting contexts, and that's what from the networks and they're streaming out, basically faced with end of the streamers themselves. They're all battling for the right. It's like the run pass balance. They need the balance of live with the balance of archive.
And the last thing I'll say, because I know you were trying to get us out of here. The fact that they can eventually over 35 days get 17.3 million to watch Tracker, even though it's much smaller live, is why they keep producing these things, because they can still make a lot of money on it. And there's still ways to, even streaming, there's an ad at the front, there's an ad at the end, they can still make money at it. And that's why they do it.
Yeah. Nothing becomes stale quicker than a sports event.
Nobody's going to go back and watch sports.
Yeah. And the real nerds have their own specialized viewing tools, the all 22s of the world. They're not going back and rewatching a broadcast version.
It's possible that I may have done that many times for Washington Redskins games.
The all 22, which was actually, we got to wrap it up. But the all 22 ends up being one of the most brilliant niche products that the NFL has put out. And a really interesting example of just how smart the NFL is monetizing every inch of their product.
And it really highlights the nerddom of the people who are willing to subscribe to do that, and present company included.
Right. Find the market, sell to the market, feed the market, and benefit from the market.
Yep. There you go.
All right, Steve. Well, at least, with the hog site, it's a warm, nostalgic relief to be talking about the off season.
This is where we thrive, man.
Right. So
they just need to have somebody get caught with a hooker on a boat or something, and we'd be right back into our comfort zone.
Right. Yes. At least we stay out of the sleaze page.
Pass around photos of cheerleaders changing.
Please
please don't. But that's our comfort zone, is what I'm saying. But please don't do that. But that is our comfort zone. So yes, we are transitioning to our comfort zone of Washington's off season, where we are trying to debate how they can recover from a ruinous regular season. And we do all of that every Thursday on the Hogside podcast and in our regular written content.
Is anyone going to go and do all 22 on David Blau's few starts or appearances in NFL games as a quarterback?
Listen, that got announced yesterday. I haven't got my hands around it yet. So I may talk somebody into doing it. Probably not
If
going to
that
be me.
exists, if you can actually go and isolate David Blau's snaps during his, I think, 4 or 5 year backup career, that is deep nerd.
I can, we probably have somebody who's nerdy enough to do that. I'll have to talk somebody into doing it on my behalf.
I've analyzed every David Blau snap to suss out their offensive philosophy.
You're talking to someone who went and did a statistical analysis of every single individual draft pick back to the year 2000. Okay. So I don't disclaim my nerddom when it comes to this stuff.
Well, there you go. So the Blau report coming up. All right, Steve, we'll see you in 2 weeks.